Alright, so we're going to be changing the driver's side tie rod on the Acura TL. I believe it's 2003 if I'm not mistaken. We'll confirm it in the title. We're going to be changing it primarily because the inner tie rod end has some looseness. Since we're taking it apart, we just may throw on an outer tie rod end as well at the same time if this one shows signs of wear. And then we'll show you the steps to get this done. First thing we're going to do is remove this nut over here for the outer tie rod. Hopefully the tie rod will come out with any problems. There's a cotter pin on top over here. You remove the cotter pin, then we loosen the nut, and then we see if the tie rod comes out simply. Sometimes they're seized in. We'll see what happens. After that, we're going to measure the distance in the threads between the inner and outer tie rod so we can realign it as close as possible while the car goes to alignment so we're not completely off. We're going to remove the clip on the outer part of the boot. We're going to remove the inner clip, which you can't see right now, which is a one-time use clip. We're going to pull the boot back, and then we're going to remove the inner tie rod where it's secured to the steering rack. So let's start with that. Alright, now that the cotter pin is out, we're going to remove the nut holding the tie rod, outer tie rod. I usually like to spray some penetrating oil on it before you start. Perfect. So there you go, the nut's off on this end. Now the tie rod seems to be pretty stuck in there. So we'll try a few little tricks and see what happens. There you go. So the way usually there's going to be a flat spot on the knuckle. You can get the tie rod end to release by shocking it and hitting both sides opposing each other with two hammers. Usually most knuckles will have a small flat spot made for doing that. You want to be hitting it both at the same time, and then you'll see it pops out and releases it. This can save you a lot of headaches, and it also allows you to save the outer tie rod instead of using a tie rod fork or tie rod tool, which usually ruins the rubber. This was a one way of getting it out without removing without damaging the rubber. So, and I usually leave the nut on there just so that once it does let go, it's not flying out the spindle. And then there you go. Now our inner tie rod is not that bad, but it's causing us a bit of noise. As you can see, it's not super stiff anymore. It's got quite a bit of mileage on it. So we're gonna put a new one on there. Okay, now that you've loosened this up, we leave the nut again back here just to hold this. We measured this already over here. It's about 13.5 millimeters from the nut to the shoulder, the threaded part that's exposed. We're going to now loosen the outer tie rod. What you're going to need on this car is a 14 and a 19. You're going to grab the inner tie rod, has a nut area here you can hold with the 14, and then the outer with a 19, and then we're going to loosen the two of them. There you go. So the outer one's off, and you can see the boot's still good. The joint feels like it has a bit of grease, but you know, when you start having a bit of slack like that, it's just a matter of time, and not a lot of time, that this is gonna need to get replaced. So might as well do it now since you're there. Parts are not that expensive. Now we got to take this nut off here. The thread seems to be pretty good, so we could just spin it off. If you have a short 19, it might be easier. There. Set that aside. Next step, we'll take that clip off, grab our pliers. There we go. That's your clip. See over here, it just goes together. That's done. Now we're going to have to undo the one-time clamp in there, which most likely will be easiest just to take a long flathead screwdriver, and we're going to put it in there. Okay, so something like this, just a small end, and on this car, it seems to be on the edge over here. Right there. Loosen the joint. You want to do this and be careful not to damage the boot. Get that clip out. You may need to get one of these at the dealer. Some people use a hose clamp. I'm not a big fan. So here's the clamp. When it's in place, you'll have the clamp like this. Okay? And then when I'm putting my screwdriver in, I'm putting it right into here, and since it's under tension, I'm twisting the screwdriver and prying it so that it lets go from these teeth, and then you're done. This clamp is now garbage. Set that aside. Now you can undo the boot from the inside and then try and pull it out slowly off the outside. You might want to hold a little bit because here's the nut thing, it's got to pop over, so you may want to spin it a bit to get it going. You could also put some penetrating oil on here to let it hop over, because you've got this little groove that it sits in to keep the boot in place. So now we have the exposed tie rod end. We'll now have to loosen it over here. You can take a big wrench, to maybe an adjustable wrench if you want. We're going to take a special tool made for this, and I'll show you that in 1 minute. When we come back, we'll clean things up and get that tool in. Alright, so here's the tie rod tool that we have for this. We're going to give this a shot on the tie rod end. The way you use it is it has an adapter inside, comes with different adapters. Right over here, you slide the adapter over the tie rod end where it has the area for the tool, and then you slide this in through the rest, and then on the end here you put your ratchet, and it allows you to loosen it up. So we take this piece, we slide it into here onto the area that it's, make sure that it fits. Take a look at a few different sizes here. There, that one fits better. And then the tool has a sliding shoulder, so we line it up so that it's straight. We get the tool in to lock on to the adapter. We turn the lock on, and now we're ready to loosen it up. There we go. Alright, and then we just spin it off. That's it, it's off. One thing I forgot to mention, on the inside you're going to have this locking washer that the tabs are pulled up to lock this in place. So before you loosen it, you'll have to bend those out to make sure that you're able to loosen this properly. So we're going to install the locking ring, which has two tabs on here which face the rack, and then we're going to install the new inner tie rod end. So we can slide that on there and then screw that in over here. You're going to have to make sure that this locking tab fits into two notches in the rack itself. So either you hold it there or you screw it in and then seat it as you install it. Okay, so once it's hand tight, we're going to use our tool again. We're going to put our special clip in here from the tool. Bring our tool back on. Like that. Lock it in. And then we'll tighten it up. There, it's going tight. Next thing we're going to have to do is knock down the locking washer, the ends that stick out where the flat areas are. So here's the one-use clamp that we're going to put back on the part. And then we're going to reinstall the boot now, putting the clamp back here. Alright, so we installed the boot, a little bit hard to see. Easy way to install the boot is you slip it over the tie rod end, the inner tie rod end. Don't forget to install the one-time clip before you do, and then turn the steering wheel all the way so it pulls the rack in, and then you want to look underneath the car and adjust the inside where it meets the rack to make sure you don't pinch it or it seats on properly, and that'll give you a hand in installing it. If you try and do it the other way, just by stretching it, you'll never get it on. Leave it turned all the way in, and then you'll have to crimp the one-time use clamp either with a side cutter or any other type of pliers that you feel comfortable using. And then you move on to the next part where we're going to put the nut back on here to lock the outer tie rod, and then install the outer tie rod with our measurement to try and approximate the old alignment. And as well, you need to remember to put the retaining clip on the outside of the boot. Now we're going to put the outer tie rod on. And here's the inner tie rod, which is a TRW part, which is this one here. So now we have our clip, we have our locking nut, the boot is secured, and now we're going to start to install the outer tie rod. What I like to do also is put a bit of anti-seize on here. Right, so now we're going to insert the outer tie rod back in the spindle. We take our nut, bring our nut back on there. Tighten this guy down. There we go. And that's done. Alright, so we've tightened the nut onto the outer tie rod. We're going to put our cotter pin through. Just like that. And now we're going to do a final adjustment over here to our measurements, and then we're going to torque down this bolt over here to hold the tie rod end locked into place. And then we're done with our tie rod replacement. And that's it. Put the wheel back on and you're done.